All right, it's 3 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm pleased to introduce Sean Beard from Sand Springs. Sean has been in education since 1996. He holds a BS in education and a master's in curriculum and instruction, focusing on technology integration. He is also a Google for Education certified trainer, specializing in Google Apps for education. He currently works as Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning at Sand Springs Schools. He's here today to talk to us about feedback loops for data-based decision making. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Wendy, and thank you guys all for being here today. As she said, I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning at Sand Springs Schools. And in that time, I've worked very closely with our PLC structure in our district, working with sites on response to intervention or RTI. And about a year ago, Dr. Duhan asked me to put together this presentation. And normally, when we go to conference, Carrie Schlehuber, who's our Assistant Superintendent of Enrollment and Special Education, she would also be presenting on this topic with me, but she's detained otherwise with another meeting today. So we're just going to go through and talk a little bit about some of the hurdles that we jumped through in getting our RTI program in Sand Springs set up, and some of the things that we've learned along the way, and then some of the best practices that we currently employ as an RTI district. Let me get my controls going here. So at the beginning of the presentation, just to kind of give you an idea where we were, everything in here is going to be referring to Otis, because back in the day, that's what it was. But so, take out Otis and add MTSS into the equation there. And in terms of where we were prior to the Otis grant, everyone was in a different spot. Several of us had gone to different conferences and learned different things about the RTI process, but our understanding was a little bit different just based on which presenter or which conference we had seen. And a lot of us were still confused about how the data, where the data points would come from, how to collect the data, and then how that would inform instruction. So everybody was in a different spot in regard to how everything was going to be working. And that's going to be true of almost any district or any building that you have. At the beginning, though, to try to remedy that situation, we sent, first of all, we set up a structure of making sure that at least one administrator in every building had solution tree training in PLC or RTI at work. And then we also had PLC coordinators for every elementary grade, pre-K through 5, and then every core subject in secondary: math, science, English, social studies, and the arts. And so we sent people to solution tree training. And then we talked about, after training, setting up our guiding coalitions. Um, then the discussion of our essential standards and our common formative assessments became important. And timing that all together, you can't see this, just got cut out by the image. I apologize. But um, all this was going to be centered around our early release time or our collaboration time for teachers, so that they could work with the data that they get back from students. And as a district, we had chosen Friday as our early release time. So every Friday, students are released early, and then teachers can get into their collaborative groups and they can meet and talk about student data that comes back. Now, of course, when you look at this whole piece right here on this slide, when you don't have a firm grasp or a firm understanding, or if you haven't had a lot of training about PLC and the RTI structure, it's a lot, and it's very confusing, and it seems like a monumental task. And I will say it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years for a district to really get a firm grasp on this. And then, when you've got staff changes, it's a continuing process. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So through the process, we have learned a lot about what does work and what doesn't work. As I said at the beginning, we all had a different understanding of what PLCs looked like and what the RTI process looked like. And so we all went to training. But what we've quickly realized over the years is that a one and done training does not work. Like I said, as faculty changes occur, you need to make sure that faculty are trained. But administrative changes occur too. And so you have to make sure that you get your administrators trained. Um, One thing that we've also learned is that buy-in is definitely required. Everybody needs to know the why behind the RTI process. So specifically, um, we have learned over the years that sending administrators and PLC coordinators to training is not enough. We've got to make sure that the classroom teachers understand everything and they don't just get that information back from us. We have tried over the years to provide training based on what we've learned. So we looked at administrators and PLC coordinators going through training as a train the trainer kind of model, and then we would pass the information on to our teachers. But we've quickly realized that the why comes across much better when you bring somebody in from the outside and conduct trainings. And so we've been doing that more in recent years. And then the agreement on the collaboration time, you can't just say that you're meeting and that you're going to talk about the data. You have to be very honest and open about what you want from that time. As you'll learn in solution tree training, they'll talk to you about setting up norms. And so that's exactly what we're talking about, making sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of when the meeting starts, what we're all going to be doing, what we're not going to do, what we're not going to let distract us. And that gives everybody the chance to focus on the data that you need to use to then turn around and inform your instruction or intervention with students when they have skill gaps. So, like I said, we've learned a lot over the years through training, but we've also learned about what not to do. So, from that point on, to get to a better place, um, it kind of helps you understand how long we've been doing this. This process started for us about 10 years ago. At that time, I was the uh, virtual school director, and I was transitioning into the role of IT director at the time. And so I was not involved in this process. I didn't get involved in this process until about 6 years ago. Um, and so as people came in and out of administration and came in and out of PLC roles, we would send people through more training and more training. But during that time, we learned these four things. We've got to make sure that we need to survey staff, find out what they know, find the right tools to help with sustaining a program centered around intervention, provide the training to the staff, and then just do the work. So I'm going to touch on each of these 4 points really quickly to kind of expand on them so you understand what we're getting from or getting to. Surveying staff, number one. I think when we go through training as administrators many times, and as you know, I'm talking about superintendents, assistant superintendents, directors, principals, assistant principals, and then also our PLC coordinators. Um, we all have a good sense of like how the RTI process works for us, but getting that knowledge from a conference that you attend and then out to teachers is very difficult. And so very quickly when we realized that it wasn't really getting where we needed it to be in terms of everyone being on the same page, we needed to get an understanding of what teachers understood. You know, we needed to know their knowledge of the RTI process. We needed to know what they knew about tiered intervention. And we needed to know from their standpoint, what is a good practice of collaboration time? Is collaboration time working the way it's supposed to? Do you have norms established? Do you have your data ready when you come to the table to talk to each other? Are you letting that data inform how you change your instruction? And what we learned through that survey process is that even though we had done some training in district, not everybody knew all the facets of RTI and how it was supposed to work. So very quickly, that told us that we had to pivot and do some different training. So one of the things that I did early on in my role in the past 6 years was I would take some of the collaboration time about once or twice a semester, and I would meet with grade level groups or subject level groups, and we would talk about tier one, tier two, tier three. What does intervention look like at tier two and tier three, but also what does in terms of tier one, what does that really involve? It doesn't really involve content knowledge as much as it involves your environment in the classroom, classroom culture, classroom management, and then just making kids feel safe. We talked about all of those things, but in a nutshell, over time, we realized we needed to step up our game in terms of training. And I'm going to talk about how we've done that more recently in just a few minutes. Second of those four things, finding the right tools. When I entered my role, we had a lot of different tools that we were using to supplement our primary curriculum. So as you know, a lot of curriculum will contain or include intervention pieces that you can use to assess students to determine if there are skill gaps. But there are other tools out there like Study Island, IXL, Reflex Math. There's Wilson Reading, really great reading, all sorts of different tools out there. And all those tools have different impacts in different ways. But when there's so many different tools, it creates inconsistency. What we knew we needed to impact, number one, was, this should say SRA, but at the time it was RSA. We needed to know how what we were doing was impacting our reading scores, how it was impacting secondary benchmarks in math and language arts, and how it was impacting student assessment. So that meant taking a good hard look at that data to determine if we're making the gains, if we're seeing the growth between benchmark periods, and seeing what we want. And what we noticed is that we weren't seeing what we wanted. And we came to the conclusion that with too many tools, not everybody was using the same thing and in the same manner. So that meant that we needed to pare down what we had. At one time, I think I counted that we had 4 different tools that would address reading and math gaps. And so we needed to pare that down and say, in addition to your primary curriculum, we're going to add this tool to help assess skill gaps and then determine what kids need to be successful. And in doing that, I had to survey the staff. You know, which of these tools do you feel works best? Why? How much training have you had on this? What training could we provide? We surveyed them on those things, and we were eventually able to pare it down to one tool. And so we use that one tool to determine between, for instance, in an SRA, between the fall and the winter and the spring benchmark, are we seeing the gains that we need, and how do we use those tools, or how do we use that tool to address the skill gaps that are uncovered by NWEA, which is our screener for SRA. Third was providing the right training. So, you know, we know what we're going to be using for our screener or our benchmarks. We know what tools that we have to supplement in between times so that we can progress monitor and make sure our students are addressing skill gaps so that they can bring their scores up. But just having the tools is not going to do it for you. And likewise, from a standpoint of everybody understanding how RTI works, we had to have some solution tree training. So even though most of our administrators had been to PLC training when we originally started this 10 years ago, we had some people leave and come back, like I said. And so as you get new staff, you put them through training, but you can't leave behind, say, for instance, that billing principal that's been here for the entirety of those 10 years, but the last time they got training was 10 years ago. You can't leave them behind, because over time, concepts change in your mind, and you also just kind of need to follow up and reinvigorate the process by providing an updated form of training. So we brought in 2 years ago, we brought in a solution tree trainer to refresh our administrators on PLC and RTI, and to refresh our PLC coordinators. Last month in January, for a professional day, we brought in 2 solution tree trainers to help teachers in the classroom understand the why behind RTI. So going further back, like I said, prior to doing these refresh trainings, some teachers had never received any training other than what we provided. And I think sometimes it's true when they say, you know, that people won't really listen to a training unless you bring somebody into the, into the district, for instance. It's like they hear me all the time. But when they were able to get the information from a solution tree trainer, it's just a little bit different. You're in a different setting. You're kind of a little bit more attentive to the process, and so those trainers were able to help uncover some of the mystery behind solution tree and RTI and PLC, but at the same time help people understand how everything kind of gels and coalesces in terms of the process. So getting away from the district-wide meetings and topics twice a year, we have now come to a point where we're going to provide regular training to our new hires and then refresher training about once every 2 years to all staff, returning teachers, so that they can stay in the know about how the process works. Doing the work, that's the fourth piece. And that takes regular reflection. So there's a couple of ways that we do this. And then there's one new thing that's not in this presentation that we're going to start changing. But with regular reflection, the classroom teacher, what we do is with each textbook adoption, I will go through the process with our textbook committee to select new curriculum. And as we select new curriculum, we will establish training events through the summer to help teachers not only, let's say, for instance, if it's a science adoption, okay, or an ELA adoption, we will give teachers the training that they need to understand how to use the new curriculum, but also we'll use part of that time to review our essential standards, make sure that these are still the standards that we feel are essential. We talk about how to unpack those standards and break them down into learning targets so that we can develop CFAs. And then we update our pacing calendars. Now, that's something that we do every time there's a textbook adoption. So, so next year when we do social studies adoption, I'll have that meeting with teachers about social studies next year. But our primary focus is on math and language arts, definitely, as a district. And so one of the things that we're going to change next year is many principals already do this, but we're going to try to get on the same page in terms of all principals having the conversation with their teachers about reviewing essential standards, making sure that they're updated to what's current with the OSD website, understanding what kinds of tools are available in the frameworks website, and then understanding how to utilize our supplemental tools to help kids address the gaps that they have in learning between benchmark periods. The other thing that we've done, and you'll see this thumbnail on the right side of the screen that shows our standards and pacing page. This is a Google site. And what we've done is when we have those conversations about our essential standards and our pacing calendars, we make those live Google Docs that are posted on this website that's available internally to all teachers, but it's blocked so students can't get to it. So, we don't want them digging into common formative assessments and looking at the answers or anything like that. But we basically built transparency so that all of that is available on a shared website so that all teachers can see it. The biggest benefit that you get from that is that when you hire a new teacher and they're not familiar to your process, then they can go to this website, they can see what's expected of them in terms of pacing and what our essential standards are, and then how to get access to our common formative assessments. The other thing that it does is it allows, say, for instance, the third grade teacher to know what skills are being taught in second grade, because they can go back and look at any grade level they want to, and they can also understand what they need to have prepared to make their students successful in the fourth grade. So there's some vertical transparency there, as well as just transparency in terms of understanding what's expected of me as a teacher. The result of this is that number one, we have a place for teachers to go to find everything that they need in terms of, like I said, essential standards and CFAs and pacing calendars, but also we have the guidance that's available in terms of understanding what we believe as a district in terms of PLC and the RTI process. So that same website has a PLC RTI page. It explains what a PLC is. It tells what our goals and our mindset is as a district in terms of tiered intervention and some of the tools that we have available to help teachers intervene when students need it. That coupled with the teaching and learning portal that I just showed you helps teachers understand and know at any given time when they just want to check as a reference, but also when they're a new hire, what they need and what they need to do as a district educator. The other tools that we have available, I haven't mentioned this a lot. I have mentioned NWEA. NWEA is our math and ELA benchmark tool for SRA purposes. But at the secondary level, 6 through 12, we use IXL, the snapshot benchmark tool in IXL as our secondary ELA and math benchmark tool. Both of those, because NWEA scores can be fed into IXL, and because IXL benchmarks affect the skill plan that's available for our kids to work on between times. Because they do work together, that means that our teachers have tools available so that they can assign skills to students when they need it. Students can log on twice a week. Our goal is that each student logs on for about 10 minutes twice a week to work on these things. But they can work towards building their skills between the benchmark periods. By focusing on that, some of our teachers have been able to raise their scores between benchmark periods, and we're starting to see some of the gains that we've been trying to achieve with our students across the district. The special education impact, this is something that Carrie would normally talk about, but she's not here. But one of the impacts that it had for us is that it uncovered the need for a dedicated curriculum for ELA and math in SPED classrooms. Oftentimes what we use in the gen ed classroom, you can't just turn around and use that exact same thing in intervention, whether it's just an RTI or an RSA or SRA classroom versus a SPED classroom. You can't use the same tool for intervention, because what happens is when the kids come to you for pull-out time, if you say, we're going to work on this, the kids will say, I've already done that. My classroom teacher did that with me. So we've worked really hard to make sure that the intervention tools that are available are different from, but complement the primary curriculum in the gen ed classroom. Currently, we use Do the Math for our math interventions in the SRA classroom and the Title I classroom, and really great reading for ELA. We're also looking at something else right now, but like I said, over time, anytime you are using tools, you need to make sure that you see what else is out there and assess over time to see if there's something we need to replace that with. Don't put yourself in a situation where you have too many tools, because when you've got different teachers using different things across the district in gen ed classrooms, one of the things that you find is that you're not going to have the impact that you want. If you pare down your tools to the necessary things for primary curriculum and then supplemental curriculum, and everybody's using the same resources and everybody is trained in that resource, you'll start to see an impact on your test scores. So testing and growth, single tool for progress monitoring and practice, IXL at the secondary level, and then NWEA scores fed into IXL at the elementary level. But we also use a data management tool called Schoolitics. In trying to understand what our data looks like, we make sure that we provide monthly meetings through our PLC coordinators to help teachers understand how to pull reports out of IXL and NWEA. But with the addition of Schoolitics, that is a data dashboard that was originally set up for classroom teachers to use in Google Classroom, but now it's spread further, and now it's a data dashboard that you can use to incorporate your student information system, tools like IXL, NWEA, all those different things, pulling them all together so that when you look at a snapshot at a child or a classroom, you can see the impact of their test scores, behavior, attendance, all those different things. And it's all in one place so that you don't have to dig in 5 different places. Schoolitics has actually been very helpful for our teachers, because they can start to dig deeper and say, why did this student drop in performance between fall and winter? What else is going on with this student? So if you start to look at attendance rates dropping, they're missing class more often, or you start to see that there's behavior issues, or you start to see that their grades are slipping, um, then it brings up questions that teachers can start to ask, or at least find the answers to see if there's a way to bring those scores back up. But at the same time, it also allows teachers to figure out what their subgroupings are a little bit better. And so they can start to group students based on ability, and then identify gaps that need to be addressed in some of those subgroups. Communication is important through this whole process. Like I said, I used to communicate out to classroom teachers by doing trainings twice a semester. We pulled back from doing that and started bringing in solution tree trainers. I've already told you that. But what do we do now with those PLC leads? And what do we do with the monthly time that we used to use for training? What we've now done is we've shifted, and instead of focusing on the facets of RTI and intervention, which they will already get at the beginning of the year and mid-year at our professional day, now the monthly topics focus on more important tasks that are important to them right now. So, like for instance, our September PLC monthly meeting will talk about getting ready for the fall benchmark, and what to look for inside your assessment tool, and how to draw the reports after the assessment window closes. And then, say for instance, February this month, the discussion would be, how do you pull that report to compare your fall benchmark to your winter benchmark scores? And then later on down the line, we'll have other meetings where we'll talk about how to use tools inside IXL to target specific skills with small groups of students, or assign individual students the skills that they need, or to look longitudinally and see for an entire class what their understanding of vertical skills looks like. So for instance, if you had kids that are underperforming in 6th grade math, knowing the fact that they struggle in 4th and 5th grade math and they've got gaps there, helps you understand why they're not performing in 6th grade. And so then you can start to go back and assign some of those other skills to help students get back to where they learn those basics, and then they can start working on 6th grade math concepts. So all of those conversations on a monthly basis, but at a timely offering, help teachers know the things that they need to know at the right time. Having a conversation about comparing fall and winter benchmark scores in the summertime at the beginning of the school year doesn't work as well as like right now, when we've just closed that winter benchmark and it's fresh in their minds. So that's why we time those topics the way we do. This is an example of some more of those topics that we do. One of the other things that we do in September, in addition to the solution tree training that we provide in August, is that in September, we'll talk about why we're an RTI district. For instance, in November, one of the other things we'll talk about is how IXL fits into tiered intervention, and the basic skills or the basic tools that you can use inside there to address gaps between benchmark periods. March, we start talking about state testing. So after spring break, we'll talk about the assessment culture. Looking at different reasons that kids don't always perform well. It's not always about content knowledge. Sometimes it's about test anxiety. Sometimes it's about not knowing how to navigate the test. So we have those conversations with our teachers in March, so that as they're preparing kids for the state assessment, not only can they help them with the academic knowledge, but they can help them overcome test anxiety and to how to approach different questions on those assessments. So those are helpful topics as we go through the process each year. So final slide here, conclusions. If you're trying to set up MTSS or RTI in your district, you've got to make sure that everybody at every level, administrators, PLC coordinators in our case, but classroom teachers and even paras. We invited all of our paras to training this last month to learn more about the process, because sometimes they hear little glimmers of what RTI is about, but they don't understand it. So making sure everybody understands the why and what is important. Consistent and continual training is also important. When you get new staff, train them, but over the course of time, give your veteran teachers refresher training. It helps keep the thing. It helps keep the system as a living thing, like like it says on that third bullet point. Review regularly. I also am in charge of professional development for the district. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll put questions in our PD survey each year about people's understanding of the RTI process. And so getting that feedback is important. It also helps us understand what kind of training we need to offer over time. Keep everybody trained and then provide consistent tools to ensure the integrity of your program. Like I said, I found a lot of tools when I stepped into my role that weren't being used with integrity. And so we pared that down, found the one or two tools that we knew would help impact our program the greatest. And we've been focused on providing the training for those. And I think we're starting to see the gains that we want. So, and that is all I have. So any questions?
Does anybody have any questions for Sean? Yes, Holly. We can't hear you, Holly. Benjamin, can you help Holly?
Oh, sorry.
There
Hey,
you go.
sorry. I was just gonna say I have a quick question, but not necessarily for Sean. I was looking at, I mean, I really like the slide with the different dates, and I just wondered or will this be available? Like, I mean, as far as the dates, as far as what he trained his teachers on, or what the professional development was on, like January was such and such. Um, will there be a video of this? Like, and a copy? Because it was very informative, and so I just wanted to make sure when I go to the schools, yeah, that one, the PLC timely topics. Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it will be available. We have a course on OSDE Connect called MTSS Implementation Year 1. And if you go and enroll in that course, all of the community of practices are on the first page if you scroll
good.
down towards the end. So each month, yeah, they'll be up. It
Yeah,
might be
I've
a couple of
enrolled.
weeks,
I just
but
haven't
this
made
one
it
will
to
be up
the
too.
end. I've enrolled. I just haven't made it to the end yet. So
If you go to the home page and you scroll down, you can see the community of practices without completing the whole course.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Welcome. There was a question I saw come in through the chat. Let me look. They were asking how you fund your trainings, continually
So
fund your trainings.
yeah, so we have been very mindful of how we use our title money, our federal funding, and so we try to focus on making sure that we use title funding when we can. I will say this: once you start spending that with your local dollars or your state dollars, you can't go back to your federal funds because of the supplant rule with federal funding. So we've been very mindful to make sure that from a standpoint of this specific topic and making sure that everybody needs to know what they need to know, we use title funds as much as possible to bring in those speakers. Now, funding, the other part of it too is not only do you have to pay a speaker to come in, but if it's off of school time, if it's out of school time, you have to pay your teachers. So we try to focus on bringing in those trainers during professional days when teachers are already there, and that helps us save a little bit on cost. But when you're doing summer training and you've got teachers off contract, we have to be prepared for providing them the proper stipend for the time that they're giving up in their summer to come in. So what we try to do with that is by doing the summer trainings around the textbook adoption cycle and then having that conversation with teachers during their adoption period, then that means that we're training fewer people at a time in the summer by doing, like, say, only ELA during the ELA adoption and only math during the math adoption. But then when everybody comes back to work and they're back on contract. Then we'll bring in a speaker for a professional day, and then we'll do the refresh training during those times.
Fantastic.
That was a long-winded response. I apologize.
Do you all have tiered support for behavior as well, or is it only academically focused?
So that's where I really wish Carrie were here. She could talk about this a little bit more, but we have been able to take advantage of some of the grant funds that are available over the past couple of years, and we have been bringing in behavior techs. So we do now have some tiered support for behavior, but it's been slow growing for us. It's only been within the past couple of years, but yes, we do. And I can hear her in the next room in her parent and administration meeting. I really wish she was here to answer the rest of that question.
All right. Are there any other questions for our presenter?
It's really quiet.
All right. Well, not seeing any, I would like to thank Sean for being here today and providing this information. Great things are happening at Sand Springs, and we
Thank you very
appreciate you
much.
sharing those with us.
Absolutely.
All right. Our next community of practice will be the last Wednesday in March. Yep, March, 3 o'clock to 3:45. I hope to see you there. Thanks.